In this video, we're going to walk through the basics of setting up Drum Machine Designer in Logic Pro. So when I was first getting started with it, it was a little confusing on where to add the instrument compared to just some of the other instruments you might be pulling from the standard Logic Pro library, and figured it might be helpful to just walk through some of that basic setup here. So the few basic things we're going to go through in this video are first, just setting up Drum Machine Designer in Logic and where to find that consistently. Second, we're going to make sure we know how to separate out the tracks in MIDI notes so that you can do cool things like having pitches assigned to each of your hits. And then last, we're going to show how to use that Drum Machine Designer setup to export all of those hits as separate tracks for mixing or sending to somebody else for a project as audio files. Before we dive in, I'm Marcus, make my own indie pop music as Cradle Cat, write and produce for other artists, as well as do some sound design and jingle work for companies. Along the way, I post things that I learn here on YouTube, as well as my music. So if you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know in the comments or shoot me a message over on Instagram. Thanks. So in this project, I already have a Drum Machine Designer kit added, just so I have a little beat in there that we can listen to set up beforehand. But to go back to the beginning for how we add that to a project, I'm going to go to New Track, Software Instrument, and this is where it confused me a little bit at first because we don't see it in the list with the rest of the instruments that we have. So we have Drum Kit Designer, that's actually a different thing, but we don't see Drum Machine Designer. So I'm going to go ahead. What we want to do is select Empty Channel Strip, click Create, and then from the left side here, go to Electronic Drum Kit, and I'm just going to choose 808 Flex. And when you pull up your info panel now, you can see we have DMD, that Drum Machine Designer, added. So that's how we get there. And the reason it didn't show up in that list that it normally would is it's not technically just one instrument. So Logic Pro's help article has they call it a track-based meta instrument. And they're setting that up using a track stack. So when we see this little drop-down arrow here, just like I have track stacks set up for my other instruments for mixing and organization, they, by default, have Drum Machine Designer set up as the same thing. So you see these individual samplers here all routing in to that track. You can see they're routing into that bus 18, and that's going to be the Drum Machine Designer bus here. So once we have that set up, I'm going to work from the one we already have here. You can see I've just recorded in some basic beat to follow along. When we extend this track stack out, this is where we can see the individual hits playing. So now that we have it set up, let's show how to separate this out so that you can control the pitch individually and do cool things like pitching your hi-hats or anything else you might want to do there. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and click that region, which by the way, I got this just without expanding anything. If you just record directly here, you will be able to record in your hits just onto one MIDI region there. Next, what we're going to do is take that one region that we did and separate by note pitch. I've already done that recently, so it's at the top. But if we go to Convert, Separate by Note Pitch. So right-clicked, Separated by Note Pitch. That automatically separates it out and puts those regions into the correct tracks based on which one you're hitting. So sounds the exact same, but now the MIDI is just controlling it from the individual track here. And the next step of actually pitching those hi-hats in this case is I'm going to click in, and now instead of just having your normal kit here, which is what we had in the original instrument or that original MIDI region, now you can hear I'm just dragging that around. You can see that you're pitching those hi-hats. So let's go ahead and drag the last ones. So So you can see it's going down there. I'm going to drag these down a little more just so it's more drastic. And now we can see so we're getting that little hi-hat step down there towards the end. So you can do all sorts of cool things with that, pitching around your hits as you go. And we did that by separating that one region into these separate regions using right-click, convert, separate by note pitch. And the last basic thing that we're going to review here is how to now export your tracks, these individual ones, as individual audio tracks that you can send as stems to your mixing engineer or anyone you're collaborating with to send those as individual files instead of just one, drum kit all in one track. Because as a mixer, I would definitely want to be able to get the kick and snare separately so that I can control those more granularly versus just getting one audio file of the whole kit. So to do that, you don't even have to do the MIDI separation that we did. That's optional for this step. If you prefer to just have them back in that one region, if you're not going to do any MIDI or pitching of hi-hats, that kind of thing, you can leave them all as one region. That's not going to affect this step. So to export all these individual sounds as separate tracks or separate stems, we'll go ahead, go to File, Export, all tracks as audio files. And some of the settings we'll walk through here. First, I just want to make sure I create a folder and just call it TMD, in my case, tutorial folder. But whatever you want to call those stem folders, just to have them in one folder is easier to send it and organize it later. I'm going to export the cycle range only, which is that little yellow-orange bar there. So just make sure that's selecting in your project everything that you want to export. So I just have the little loop exported. I have WAV file, 24-bit. Those are, you can change you can make that higher quality if you want. For multi-output instrument, it's not going to affect Drum Machine Designer because these are actually separate tracks. So we'd be fine with just one file per track. But often in my projects, I have other instruments that have multiple channel outputs where I would need to use one file per channel strip. So either of these would work in this case. Usually I end up using channel strip in my other projects though. And we want to not bypass effects plugins because that's got everything here that's affecting the sound. And if I'm exporting the whole song, not just a loop, I'll usually include that audio tail. And if I'm confident that it's not clipping, normalize will be off. If you're not confident that it won't be clipping, which is when the volume of the audio file is too high for the audio file, I would go ahead and flip on overload protection. Otherwise, just leave that off. If you use overload protection, it just won't keep the relative loudnesses of those audio files. So once I have all that set up, we'll go ahead and click export. And now I've pulled up the resulting folder that it was exported into, that DMD tutorial stems, and we see all of those individual tracks. You can see some that I don't even have any audio in that we weren't using, but this will have all those hi-hats labeled with whatever setting we had in that Save As dialog box. I hope you found this video helpful for getting started with some of the basics on Drum Machine Designer. Just to review, we went through how to add the track to begin with, since it's not, in the standard list of the other virtual instruments we were using. It's that separate stack of tracks, all feeding into that one bus track here, or the track stack. And so we went through that empty channel strip and then just choosing the kit from the library and going from there. We then looked at how to separate that one MIDI region of the beat that we had set up into separate MIDI regions by converting by note pitch into separate MIDI tracks. That let us pitch those individual hits by dragging the MIDI note up and down on the piano roll, just to get a cool pitched hi-hat sound. And then lastly, we walked through how to export all of those sounds, individual hits as separate individual stems or separate individual audio files to make it easier to send over to a mixing engineer or whoever else you might be working with on this project, and sending those as audio files instead of sharing a whole project, that kind of thing. So if you found this video helpful, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, let me know either in the comments or send me a message over on Instagram, and hope to see you next time.